When she looked at me and whispered, "My son's your age, that's why I want you," I didn't know whether to run from the danger of it, or lean into the pull I'd been fighting all along. I'll never forget the moment she said it. We were sitting in her living room, late in the evening, the kind of hour where silence feels heavier, almost alive. A single lamp glowed beside us, throwing soft light across her face, and the rest of the house was drowned in shadow. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the tick of a wall clock somewhere behind me, and her quiet breathing as she sat across from me, her legs folded neatly, a cup of tea in her hands. She had invited me over just to talk, she'd said. And I believed her. At least, I wanted to believe her. Because deep down, I already knew there was something unspoken between us, something that had been building for weeks in the stolen glances, the lingering pauses, the way she always seemed to smile a little longer at me than necessary. But still, I wasn't ready for her words. Her voice came low, almost like she was confessing to the air, not to me. "My son's your age," she said, her eyes fixed on the rim of her cup. And then, after a small pause that felt like the world itself was holding its breath, she added, "That's why I want you." I felt the air catch in my throat. It wasn't what she said that stunned me. It was the way she said it. There wasn't anything careless in her tone. No playfulness, no tease. It was raw. A truth she could barely carry on her shoulders, one she had finally decided to place in front of me. I stared at her, my chest tight. Her fingers trembled slightly as she set the cup down on the table, porcelain clinking against wood. She still wouldn't look at me. I thought about her son, my friend, someone I'd grown up with, someone who would never imagine his mother sitting in this moment with me. The thought brought a weight of guilt that settled sharp in my stomach. And yet, tangled with that guilt was something I couldn't deny, desire. Not just for her, but for the honesty between us. For the risk she was taking by saying out loud what most people would bury forever. Finally, she glanced up. Our eyes met. And in that fragile, stolen second, I saw everything she was too proud to put into words. Loneliness. Fear. Longing. And something softer, something that almost made my throat ache, hope. I didn't know what to do with any of it. A part of me wanted to reach across the small space between us, to take her trembling hand and let her know she wasn't alone. Another part screamed at me to run, to put distance between us before this went somewhere either of us could ever undo. But instead I just sat there, my heart pounding in my chest, staring at her in silence. And I knew, in that silence, that nothing would ever be the same again. The silence after her confession was unbearable. I could hear everything, the faint buzz of the light bulb above us, the soft ticking of the clock on her wall, even the way her breath hitched when she shifted in her seat. It was the kind of silence that presses against your chest, demanding an answer you don't know how to give. Her words kept echoing in my head. "My son's your age, that's why I want you." Part of me couldn't believe she'd said it. The other part of me couldn't believe how much I wanted to hear it again. She sat across from me, her body drawn in tight, like she was bracing for rejection. Her arms folded across her chest, shoulders tense, her eyes lowered as though she had already decided I was going to walk away. And maybe I should have. Maybe that was the right thing. But the truth was, I didn't want to. I studied the way her hair fell slightly out of place, the strands catching the lamplight. I noticed the way her lips pressed together, fighting against the tremble of vulnerability. She was always so composed, so confident when I saw her around others, but here, with me, she was fragile in a way that made my throat ache. "I shouldn't have said that," she whispered suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was unsteady, quiet but sharp enough to cut right through me. "Forget it, please." But how could I forget it? The words were alive inside me now, and pretending otherwise felt impossible. I leaned back in the chair, trying to breathe, trying to ground myself. My heart was hammering, each beat reminding me of the choice that hung between us. This wasn't some casual flirtation. This wasn't a line we could cross without consequence. Her son, our friends, the way people would look at us if they knew. It all came crashing in at once, and yet, None of it felt as heavy as the thought of walking away from her right now. She shifted again, unfolding her arms, then quickly clasping her hands together in her lap. I noticed a faint tremor in her fingers. She tried to disguise it by reaching for her cup, but her hand missed the handle, and she pulled back as if embarrassed. Something inside me cracked open then. She wasn't just testing me or chasing some thrill. She was risking her dignity, her peace, maybe even her reputation, all because, for some reason, she saw something in me she wanted. I didn't move closer, not yet. I didn't touch her hand, even though every part of me wanted to. Instead, I just said quietly, "I can't forget it." Her eyes snapped up to mine. And for the first time that night, I saw relief flicker across her face, even if only for a heartbeat. The silence returned, but this time, it wasn't suffocating. It was charged. It was alive. And in that moment I knew hesitation wouldn't save me. Not from her. Not from myself. We didn't plan to spend the evening together again, but somehow I ended up there. Her house felt different now, charged with something neither of us dared name. She'd suggested a movie, something light-hearted, but from the very first frame I knew neither of us was really watching. I sat on the edge of the couch at first, careful to leave space, careful not to misread what had happened between us the night before. But space has a way of shrinking when two people want the same thing and are too afraid to admit it. She shifted closer. Not much, just enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her shoulder. My chest tightened. Every sense in me seemed sharper, more alert. I could hear the faint rustle of the blanket she had draped over her legs, the subtle rhythm of her breathing, even the clink of ice in the glass she held. At one point, she leaned forward to hand me a drink. And that was when it happened. Her hand brushed against mine. It should have been nothing. A passing accident. But it wasn't. Her fingertips grazed my skin, feather-light yet enough to set every nerve in my body alight. I froze, glass halfway between us, staring at the point of contact like it was something forbidden. She didn't pull away. Not immediately. Instead, her fingers lingered, not long enough to be obvious, but long enough for me to know it wasn't by mistake. I glanced at her. She was still watching the screen, her lips pressed together in a faint, unreadable line. But I saw it, the flicker in her eyes, the tiniest hint of a smile she was trying so hard to hide. My chest felt too small for my heart. That single touch carried more weight than any kiss I'd ever known. It wasn't just skin against skin, it was an invitation, a question, a door left slightly open. I held onto the glass, my hand brushing against hers a moment longer before she finally let go. Even after, I could still feel her touch as if it had branded me. The movie droned on, forgotten. I tried to focus, but all I could think about was how close she was, how the faint scent of her perfume wrapped around me, how the warmth of her body pulled at me like gravity. I wanted to reach over, to close the space between us and see if she'd let me. But I didn't. Not yet. Because I knew once I did, there would be no turning back. Instead, I sat there in the flickering light of the television, my pulse racing, every inch of me alive with the memory of her fingers brushing mine. And for the first time, I understood that intimacy doesn't always come with grand gestures. Sometimes it's hidden in the smallest of moments. Sometimes it's just a touch, a fleeting, fragile touch, that changes everything. The movie ended, though I couldn't have told you what it was about. The credits rolled, the room went quiet, and in that silence I realized something had shifted between us. That single brush of her fingers against mine had left me restless, my thoughts circling endlessly. She reached for the remote and muted the TV, leaving only the soft hum of the house around us. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then she exhaled, long and weary, as though she'd been holding her breath for years. "I don't usually do this," she said softly. Her voice wasn't the confident tone she used when talking to others, it was thinner, almost fragile. "I don't usually let people in." I turned toward her. She sat with her hands clasped loosely in her lap, her eyes focused on the floor. The lamplight caught in the strands of her hair, and for the first time, she looked less like the composed, untouchable woman I'd always seen, and more like someone carrying a weight too heavy to hold alone. I didn't interrupt. I just let her talk. My whole life, she went on, I've been reliable, dependable, the one people could lean on. My husband, my son, my family, everyone. I gave them everything I had. And when it was over, she hesitated, her voice faltering. There was nothing left for me. Her words sank into me like stones. She wasn't just telling me about her past, she was giving me a glimpse into the quiet emptiness she lived with. I tell myself I don't need anyone, she whispered, that I've already had my life, my chance at love. But then you come along, and suddenly I feel. She stopped, biting down on the rest. I could feel her struggling, afraid of how much she was revealing. So I leaned forward slightly, my voice low, steady. You feel what? She looked up then, and her eyes glistened in the dim light. Vulnerability poured out of her gaze, raw, unguarded, almost painful to witness. Alive, she finally admitted. You make me feel alive again. The words lodged in my chest. I didn't know what to say, so I did the only thing that felt right. Slowly, carefully, I reached over and covered her hand with mine. Her fingers stiffened under my touch, as if startled. But then, gradually, she relaxed. Her shoulders softened, her lips parted in the faintest sigh. She didn't pull away. For a moment, we just sat there, my hand resting on hers, her heartbeat racing beneath her skin. No words, no explanations. Just the quiet truth of two people leaning into each other's broken edges. And in that fragile silence, I realized something. She wasn't searching for someone to rescue her. She wasn't chasing youth or escape. She was risking herself, letting me see the part of her she hid from everyone else. And that trust, that fragile, aching trust, was more intimate than any kiss could have been. That night, the rain came. It started soft, a whisper against the windows, then grew steady, filling the silence between us with a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. We sat side by side on the couch, closer than before, a shared blanket across our legs. The world outside seemed far away, blurred by the storm, and in that small cocoon of sound and warmth, the space between us all but disappeared. I could feel her shoulder brushing against mine, the heat of her presence sinking into me. It was the kind of closeness you don't plan, it just happens. And once it does, you can't think about anything else. She tilted her head back against the cushion, her eyes drifting shut for a moment. When she opened them again, she caught me watching her. She didn't look away this time. Instead, she gave me a smile, soft, tired, but devastating in the way it reached her eyes. You make me forget how old I am, she whispered. The words stole the air from my lungs. There was no hesitation in her tone, no apology. Just truth. Pure, unguarded truth. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. My pulse thundered too loudly, my thoughts tangled between guilt and longing. But I didn't look away. Neither did she. Seconds stretched, heavy and electric. The rain filled the silence, steady and insistent, as if urging us forward. Her hand shifted under the blanket. Just a small movement, but enough for her fingers to graze against mine. This time, it wasn't accidental. This time, it was deliberate. I turned my hand slightly, brushing my fingertips against hers, and the spark that ran through me was almost unbearable. I wanted more, so much more, but I was terrified of ruining the fragile balance we built. Slowly, I lifted my hand, hovering just inches from her cheek. My fingers trembled in the air, caught between desire and restraint. She didn't move. She didn't pull away. She just looked at me, her eyes dark and searching, as though she was daring me to decide. For one suspended moment, the whole world narrowed to that distance, the space between my hand and her skin. I could almost feel the warmth of her cheek beneath my palm, the softness I ached to touch. But then I stopped. My hand froze, trembling in midair. I couldn't do it. Not yet. Her lips parted slightly, a silent exhale, and then she gave the faintest shake of her head, not in rejection, but in understanding. She knew exactly what was happening inside me. She felt it too. I let my hand fall back to my lap, every nerve in my body still burning with what almost happened. She leaned just a little closer, her shoulder pressed firmly against mine, and in that closeness she whispered, "We'll get there." And somehow, those 3 words carried more weight than if we had kissed. They carried patience, trust, and the promise of a moment that would come, when we were both ready to let it. By morning, the storm had passed. The house was quiet, and sunlight poured through the thin curtains, casting pale gold across the living room. I sat at her kitchen table, cradling a mug of coffee she'd made for me, the steam curling upward like a secret between us. She moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, but there was a softness to her now, a carefulness in the way she avoided my eyes. I knew she was thinking about the night before, about how close we'd come, about the weight of what was left unsaid. Finally, she set down her own cup and leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely. She looked at me, and her smile was faint but tinged with something heavier. "I'm sorry," she said. The words hit me harder than I expected. "Sorry? For what?" "For putting you in this position," she replied, her voice low, almost hesitant. "For wanting something I shouldn't. For making things complicated." I shook my head, setting my cup aside. "Don't apologize for being honest with me." She held my gaze then, her expression unreadable, searching. "You don't understand," she whispered. "People would never approve. They'd think I was selfish. Reckless. Maybe I am. But I can't seem to stop wanting this, wanting you." Her vulnerability cut through me. She wasn't playing a game, she wasn't trying to trap me in something I didn't want. She was bearing the part of herself she usually kept hidden, the part afraid of being judged, of being seen as foolish for daring to want more from life. I stood, slowly, and crossed the small space between us. She didn't move. Her breath caught when I reached up, gently brushing a strand of hair back from her face. My fingertips grazed her temple, trailing down to her cheek. Her skin was warm, softer than I'd imagined, and I felt her lean into my touch just slightly, as if torn between resisting and surrendering. "You don't have to hide who you are with me," I said quietly. Her eyes glistened, and she gave a small, shaky laugh. "You make it sound so easy." "Maybe it can be," I murmured. For a moment, the tension between us wasn't sharp anymore. It wasn't a battle of right and wrong, or a storm of guilt and longing. It was something gentler. A peace I hadn't expected. She reached up then, her fingers brushing through my hair with a tenderness that made my chest ache. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a kiss or a promise. It was something quieter, something steadier, a touch that spoke of trust, of permission, of choosing connection over fear. I closed my eyes and let the moment sink in. The warmth of her hand. The steadiness of her presence. The fragile but undeniable truth that, whatever came next, neither of us was alone in it anymore. And for the first time, that was enough. A few days later, we found ourselves walking together through the park near her house. The air was cool, the sky brushed with the fading colors of late afternoon. Children laughed in the distance, couples strolled past us, and everything about the world seemed ordinary. But inside me, nothing felt ordinary anymore. We didn't talk much at first. She walked beside me, her hands tucked into her coat pockets, her eyes scanning the trees as though looking for answers in their quiet sway. I could sense the thoughts circling inside her, the same ones that had kept me awake at night, the what-ifs, the judgments, the fears of what this could mean. Finally she spoke, her voice steady but low. "I keep waiting for the moment this will feel wrong. The moment I'll regret it." I looked at her, at the way the wind teased strands of hair across her face, at the guarded hope in her eyes. "And has it?" I asked softly. She shook her head, a small, almost reluctant smile tugging at her lips. "No. Not once." Something loosened in my chest. I reached down without thinking, letting my fingers brush against hers. She hesitated, just for a heartbeat, then slid her hand into mine. The simple act felt monumental. Her palm was warm against mine, her grip both tender and firm, like she was claiming this choice even as she feared it. We walked like that for a while, our steps in rhythm, our silence no longer heavy but full, like it carried a quiet promise. People passed us, but I didn't care. I wasn't looking over my shoulder for who might see, or wondering what they would think. All I cared about was the steady press of her hand against mine, the unspoken agreement that we weren't hiding anymore. She glanced at me, her eyes softening. "You realize this won't be easy," she said. "People will talk. Some will never understand." I squeezed her hand gently. "Let them talk. I don't care." Her gaze lingered on me, searching, as though testing the weight of my words. Then, for the first time, I saw something shift in her. The hesitation, the fear, it didn't vanish, but it loosened its grip. What replaced it was quieter, braver acceptance. We stopped near a bench, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. She sat, and I joined her. For a moment, we just watched the world move around us, children playing, dogs chasing after sticks, couples wrapped up in their own small worlds. And then, slowly, she leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder. I breathed her in, the faint scent of her perfume, the warmth of her body against mine, the steady rhythm of her presence. My arms slipped around her shoulders, pulling her closer, and she sighed, a sound that carried relief more than anything else. In that moment, I realized something simple yet profound. It didn't matter that she was older, or that her son was my age, or that the world might never understand. What mattered was this, the quiet certainty that, against every odd, every fear, every expectation, we had found each other. And for us, that was enough. More than enough.